Imagine standing at 8,000 meters. The air is so thin, every breath feels like drowning in slow motion. Your vision tunnels, your hands shake, and yet your brain tells you to keep climbing. Over 300 people have died here on Everest, their bodies still frozen in place, a silent warning to those who pass. This place is called the death zone. Up here, the body is literally shutting down. Cells starve, muscles consume themselves, and decision-making collapses. They should warn. Instead, they prove to climbers that the summit is worth the cost. Why? Because obsession overrides survival. For many, turning back feels worse than death. They've trained for years, spent thousands of dollars, told the world they'd conquer the highest peak. In their minds, not reaching the top means failure not just as climbers, but as human beings. Because here's the thing about obsession, it makes rational choice impossible. The trap isn't Everest. The trap is the mind. If you were 200 meters from the summit, lungs burning, would you push on or turn back? Comment below in one word, risk or retreat. Every year, thousands apply for permits to climb Everest, even knowing the death rate hovers around 1 in 60. Why? The answer lies deep in psychology. Psychologists describe many of these climbers as type T personalities, thrill seekers wired to crave risk. Neuroscience shows they often have lower baseline dopamine. Ordinary pleasures don't register the same way. To feel alive, they need intensity. High altitude, near-death danger. That's their gamble. But there's more. Many describe Everest as a spiritual magnet. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called it the flow state, that razor-thin moment where challenge and skill meet, dissolving everything else. For climbers, the summit isn't just a place. It's the ultimate psychological high. But here's where obsession becomes dangerous. It bends perception. Climbers report hearing phantom voices, seeing visions, even feeling the mountain itself pulling them higher. Dr. Ken Kammerer, who studied high-altitude psychology, found that oxygen deprivation fuels these altered states. What feels like destiny may just be a starving brain. Pause for a moment. Think of something you've been obsessed with, so focused you ignored hunger, sleep, even pain. Hold that thought, because the same chemistry driving your daily obsessions is what drives climbers into the death zone. And this is where Everest becomes more than a mountain. It becomes a trap. Next, we'll explore how obsession rewires the brain, and how what climbers do up here isn't so different from what you're doing right now. Obsession doesn't just inspire daring climbs. It rewires the brain. At sea level, your mind makes thousands of small decisions every day. Psychologists estimate we make over 35,000 micro-decisions in 24 hours. On Everest, each one is harder. High altitude strips away oxygen, starving the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking. That's where decision fatigue sets in. Climbers become less capable of weighing risks, more likely to make impulsive choices. Something as simple as clipping into a rope or rationing oxygen becomes a coin toss. Add in the psychology of addiction, and Everest starts looking less like a mountain and more like a slot machine. Some climbers show signs of reward deficiency syndrome. Their brains don't get the normal hit from everyday rewards. So they chase bigger, riskier highs. For them, the summit isn't just a goal, it's a chemical fix. This is where the term summit fever comes from, a documented psychological phenomenon where the desire to reach the top overrides self-preservation. Climbers ignore storms, exhaustion, even their guides' warnings. They gamble everything for the payoff of a few minutes at the summit. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much risk would you take for your biggest dream? Think honestly before you answer. Most people say 3 or 4, but Everest climbers are at a 9 or 10. Where are you? And here's the twist. Summit fever isn't unique to mountaineers. The same brain chemistry drives investors who refuse to sell a crashing stock, gamblers chasing one more hand, even people refreshing their phone for likes. Everest just turns those everyday risks into life-or-death stakes. But obsession doesn't happen in isolation. The mountain isn't climbed alone, and the social pressure to keep going can be just as deadly. Climbing Everest isn't done in isolation. Every step is taken with other climbers, Sherpas, and guides. Yet that social environment creates traps just as dangerous as avalanches. Psychologists call it groupthink, the pressure to conform, even when the decision is irrational. On Everest, if a team member pushes toward the summit, others follow, afraid of being the one who quits. In life or death environments, that pressure is magnified. Then there's the sunk cost fallacy. By the time climbers reach the death zone, many have spent years of training, tens of thousands of dollars, and weeks of brutal effort. Turning back doesn't just feel like failure. It feels like erasing their entire investment. That mental trap has killed more climbers than frostbite. And on top of that is a social comparison effect. Imagine watching others stumble toward the summit, even as they collapse from exhaustion. If they can keep going, why can't you? Here's the irony. Everest climbers are often elite professionals, doctors, CEOs, scientists, people trained to make rational decisions. Yet in the thin air of Everest, they fall prey to the same flawed thinking we all do. Let me ask you, have you ever kept going with something just because you'd already invested too much to quit? A job, a relationship, a project? That's Everest thinking, just scaled up to lethal altitude. And here's the darkest twist. Sometimes, the frozen bodies on the trail aren't warnings. They're markers. Climbers use them as waypoints, thinking, if they made it this far, maybe I can too. That social signal can literally lead someone into death. But Everest doesn't just test psychology, it exposes it. Because the final danger isn't the mountain itself. It's what happens when your own brain turns against you. Some climbers survive Everest's death zone. Others don't, and their stories reveal the human cost of obsession. Take Rob Hall, the 1996 guide who led clients to the summit during a deadly storm. He helped others to safety at the cost of his own life. Or David Sharp, who in 2006 was found frozen near the top, passed by dozens of climbers on their way up. These aren't just statistics. They are stories of ambition, loyalty, and the thin line between courage and obsession. Psychologists say these deaths illustrate symbolic immortality, the human drive to leave a mark. Edmund Hillary's name is remembered worldwide, even though thousands of local officials and ordinary people did remarkable things but faded into obscurity. Everest offers a chance at that immortality, making climbers risk everything. Then there's the peak end rule. Humans judge experiences by their climax and ending. For a climber, the few minutes on the summit can outweigh hours or days of suffering, making risk seem worth it. And survivorship bias clouds perception. Media highlight the triumphant few, while the 299 who turned back or died quietly are nearly invisible. This illusion fuels obsession in those who follow. Think about your own Everest. What would you risk for that one defining moment? Comment using just one word to describe it. Climbers aren't the only ones trapped by obsession. The same brain chemistry drives everyday behaviors. Chasing likes, gambling, career risks. Everest just magnifies the stakes. In the final section, we'll reflect on what Everest teaches about obsession and how understanding it could save your own life. Everest isn't just a mountain. It's a mirror for human obsession. The same chemical and psychological patterns that push climbers toward the summit show up in everyday life. Think about concrete examples. The entrepreneur who mortgages their house for a failing startup, the athlete who trains through injury, or even someone glued to endless social media feeds. Like climbers, we often fail to notice our own sunk cost fallacies and overestimated risks. Psychologists call this summit fever in daily life, when the allure of success overrides caution. The peak end rule explains why the few moments of triumph can feel worth hours of struggle, just as the climber treasures minutes on the summit. And symbolic immortality drives us. We want our efforts to matter, to be remembered, to leave a mark. But there are warning signs. Pay attention to physical strain, social pressure, repeated risk-taking without progress, or ignoring sound advice. These are the signals your personal Everest may be turning into a trap. Comment your Everest using one word and tag someone obsessed with something seemingly impossible, but don't reveal what it is. Awareness is your lifeline. Understanding how obsession, social pressure, and cognitive biases shape decisions allows you to pause before stepping into danger. Survival and true achievement often lie in knowing when to turn back. And just as the human brain drives climbers to extreme heights, it also responds to subtle social cues, like a simple gesture with immense power. Explore that on our other channel to see how even a finger can influence history and human behavior.